We treat turning 18 as a hard finish line. The law says you're an adult, so society assumes you are fully baked, that your personality, your brain structure, and your worldview are essentially frozen in place. Early psychology validated this idea. Foundational theorists like Sigmund Freud argued that by the time your physical body finishes growing, your psychological development is over. You've reached your final form, and you simply live out the rest of your days. That made sense in his era. For most of human history, the average life expectancy hovered around 40. If you only had a few decades to live, early theorists assumed that by age 18, you needed every cognitive tool required for survival locked into place. Over the last century and a half, medical advancements, vaccines, and improved sanitation have effectively doubled that lifespan. We now effectively live two distinct lives, the first from birth to 40, and the second from 40 until death. Because of this massive expansion, researchers realized a crucial fact. You are not done developing. Your brain and personality are locked in a lifelong sequence of crises, cognitive upgrades, and social adaptations. That continuous sequence starts with absolute vulnerability. As an infant, you have zero ability to keep yourself alive, so you engage in a child-caregiver dance. You cry out in distress and wait to see how the world responds. Psychologist Erik Erikson mapped this out as the crisis of trust versus mistrust. If a caregiver consistently meets your distress with warmth and a diaper change, you learn the environment is safe. If your cries are met with anger, neglect, or chaos, you develop a deep-seated mistrust of human connection. At the same time, you are trying to organize an overwhelming amount of physical information. Researcher Jean Piaget theorized that children build mental frameworks called schemas, generalizations that help them sort out new objects and experiences so their developing brains don't get overloaded. Modern parenting often tries to keep kids perfectly comfortable, but Piaget argued that cognitive stress is a requirement for growth. Children have to make mistakes, get confused, and encounter objects that don't fit their current understanding in order to force those schemas to evolve. Early childhood serves as the primary programming phase, where we decide at a neurological level whether reality is something to explore or something to fear. Eventually, that growing brain hits adolescence, a stage of life currently undergoing a chaotic, unique structural collision. Look at this chart. Over the last century, biological puberty plummeted to age 10, but psychological adulthood pushed outward to 26. This gap traps modern youth in identity versus role confusion. For a decade, they must awkwardly build their independent self-concept. The danger is hyperfixation. Imagine dedicating 100% of your psychological real estate to a single role, like a star athlete. If that career ends, your sense of self vaporizes. Without alternative roles, people frequently collapse into self-destructive behavior. Surviving the transition into adulthood requires actively building a diversified, multifaceted identity. You need separate psychological slices, friend, student, artist, to act as a buffer when inevitable failures hit. When we finally enter the second life of young to middle adulthood, our focus shifts. While we navigate careers and rent, our brains are often consumed by a deep, biologically driven search for human connection. Erikson framed this as the crisis of intimacy versus isolation. It explains why some adults desperately crave a relationship, but routinely sabotage it right around the 6-month mark. At month 6, the curated, perfect version of a new partner fades, and their raw, flawed humanity starts to show. To a psychologically healthy person, that authenticity feels safe. But if you carry unresolved baggage from infancy, that required vulnerability triggers your deep-seated mistrust. True intimacy feels like a trap, causing you to panic, blow up the relationship, and sprint back to isolation. Adult development also demands a shift in cognitive processing. We often assume that every healthy adult must eventually reach a peak of abstract, westernized logic to be considered fully developed. That is culturally inaccurate. For indigenous tribes in the Amazon, abstract algebraic logic is useless. Survival in the dense jungle demands an extraordinarily detailed, concrete cataloging of the physical space, knowing instantly which leaf is medicinal and which is highly poisonous. Optimal development requires precisely tuning your emotional boundaries and cognitive architecture to master your specific environment. Eventually, we enter late adulthood. Here, every human being must confront their own mortality and evaluate the sum of their choices through Erikson's final crisis: ego integrity versus despair. In historical World War II experiments, subjects placed in complete isolation, with perfect climate control and plenty of water, suffered systemic physical breakdown and severe cellular dehydration within 72 hours. The immediate life-saving cure for those physical symptoms of starvation was not food or medicine. It was simply having another human being walk into the room and make contact. Our culture often dreads aging, but the data tells a different story. If you take care of yourself, your healthiest physical years actually occur in your mid to late 30s, and your capacity for complex problem-solving and decision-making peaks in your 50s. Human development remains an active, lifelong biological and social puzzle, one that you hold the agency to solve until your very last breath.